start to go into more details about how we are implementing the new regulations, and we will start with the most, should I say, the most exciting part, but all the parts are exciting, but this one is particularly exciting, I think, which is the UTM, U-Space. And for this purpose, we have gathered a panel which is composed of the best experts in Europe on this topic, in Europe and beyond.
Europe and global.
In Europe and beyond. I will introduce each member of the panel. So we have Johan de Kuiper there, who is the CEO of Skies. We have Benny Davidor, who is the Director for Initial Airworthiness Division of the CA of Israel. So that's our worldwide experts on the topic. Eugenio Diota-Levi, who is the remotely piloted aircraft task force coordinator for IFATCA, which is the Federation of Air Traffic, International Federation of Air Traffic Controllers. Sure. And we have, last but not least, Koen de Vos. Let me check what your title is. It's just Secretary General of GUTMA. Yes?
Thank you, sir.
So we will do the following. I will ask one specific question to each of the panel members. They will have 7 minutes, not one more. That's the instructions from the lady in blue there. 7 minutes, and I will keep the time, n'est-ce pas, Koen, to make sure that they all respect the 7 minutes, because then the more interesting part is the discussion with the questions that you will have asked on Slido, or the questions that they may want to ask to each other if they want. Okay? So 7 minutes each, and then a broader discussion. And I think we will start with Johan, if I'm right, to talk to us about how you see U-Space implementation in Europe, and how you think that this implementation of U-Space will support the development of BVLOS US operations in the European airspace. The floor is yours, Johan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick. First, maybe to introduce a little bit Skies. I'm the CEO from Skies, and the last years we invested a lot in drones and to give this new promising industry maximum chances. And also to make sure, and as an ANSP, it's very important safety or high levels of safety, that these new users don't impact this high level of safety, so that we can guarantee each and every day to manned and unmanned traffic. And some examples of these investments, we participated and also led some CSREU projects. We were also one of the first ANSPs in Europe to open our airspace, controlled airspace, to drones. And because in many controlled airspace it's still difficult, not allowed for drones to operate. It's not the case in Belgium. And we were also one of the first ANSPs in Europe to implement a digital traffic management system. We are also now working together with a lot of stakeholders on the Birdie project, where with different countries, with different stakeholders, we prepare the implementation of U-Space. Because as you know, from the beginning of this year, the 26th of January, there is the new regulation that was put in place, and now everyone has to implement it. And last but not least, we've invested also in a subsidiary, Skydrone, with the ambition to become a USSP. Skydrone, which was a subsidiary, where we have also second shareholders, because in the beginning there was no clarity about a Chinese wall between an ANSP, between a USSP, and we started there, and I think it's very promising. Now, how do I see the U-Space implementation in Europe? It's happening in a fragmented way. We see in different countries different timelines of readiness of national CAAs and also USSPs and ANSPs. And we see also different views and operating models. So we think the risk, is that at the end, we end with 30 plus dialects of U-Space in Europe. And therefore, it's a challenge, I think, and mainly for USSPs, that we harmonize it so that we can create a competitive market for use-based services in Europe. And that was, I think, also the target of the European Commission. And there we think we are convinced that EASA has a role to play as facilitator, as orchestrator, to get this harmonization through standardization, collaboration, and so on, so that we can create a flourishing European drone industry. So I'm convinced that USSPs will play a crucial role, and without USSPs there will be no use-based services. We will have a slowing down of drone service markets, as drone operators will not be able to refer to risk mitigation tools. And that's one of the most important things that these USSPs offers. And we often see that companies for drones are often startup companies facing significant costs, system development, certification. So it's very important to have these USSPs and also this certification. And we see that not everywhere there is the same speed or timing to have the certification of these USSPs. How do I position use-based versus BVLOS? And I think, yes. BVLOS use-based by its design will be the major enabler of the more complex, risky drone flights, and including BVLOS. And because use-based is really a structural risk mitigation framework that is offered and that can help us. And in Belgium, and that's, I'm now going to talk a little bit our use-based implementation in Belgium. We are now arriving at, we did BVLOS with our SkyDrone subsidiary. And what we see in the past years is that the demand for drone services is increasing. The drone technology has been maturing, and GeoZones in Belgium have been created, and GeoZones managers have invested in automated UTM software. And then one of the first projects we had resulted in the implementation of automated drone units, drone in a box. And for example, in the Port of Antwerp, we did a lot of work there together with different stakeholders, and we went further. And the next problem we had to solve was enable those automated drones to fly on a daily basis. And with SkyDrone, our subsidiary, we developed a use-based framework that enables these scalable BVLOS flights. And we will use then this framework to implement really the use space. And therefore, we need some more building blocks, gap fillers. We are also already, as SKYs, the ANSPs, already designated by Belgian authority to become the CISP, who is also very important for the implementation of this use space. We are working on the dynamic airspace reconfiguration and the inclusion of key stakeholders like state aircraft operators. So we are really, and I see that my minutes are nearly finished. I will go. We are, I think, very keen on progressing on use space, and we already did, I think, some things. Thank you very much.
Johan, one interesting, so I will not completely respect the script, I'm sorry about that, but it's interesting because SKYs is an air traffic control service provider, and a number of air traffic control service providers are creating, like you, the subsidiary which is going to become a USSP. But do you still believe that there is a European market for it? If each ANSP has its own subsidiary providing services, do you still think that there will be a market for you in France, in Germany, where also DFS, DSNA will have potentially created their own subsidiary for USSP?
First, I don't think every ANSP already created some subsidiaries. They're a limited one. Of course, what is very important is what I told in the beginning, that we don't have in each country different use space implementation and different dialects. And there I count on EASA that there is some harmonization so that if, for example, we do it in Belgium with the USSP, that it's easy to do it also in another country. And that was, I think, also originally the idea of the European Commission. And there I count on EASA and so on to help for this. And I'm convinced we do not need every ANSP to create a subsidiary. No, at the contrary, I think we can do it with a limited number.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let me turn to Benny. So in Israel, you have a long history of operating drones and also manufacturing drones. Can you present your experience, or your own experience, but your organizational experience in the field of US integration, and which best practices would you recommend to us? Benny.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you on behalf of our DG for asking us to participate here. And I would like to share about experience in development of use space in Israel. For the last 2 years, we have a drone. It's called the Israeli National Drone Initiative, which is a collaboration between government bodies and industry in order to implement the ecosystem. Our vision is to promote drone commercial application, social, environmental, and economical impact, allowing flight in dense urban environment while collaborating with other users. I will, because of the short time, I will jump to the main thing. The main thing in order to create this ecosystem is to collaborate between all bodies, to collaborate between government, collaborate with industry, collaborate with the NSP. And in Israel, we created this ecosystem. So in the last 2 years, we had 8 large-scale demonstrations, each one for 2 weeks. You know, in this demonstration, we collected data about 18,000 sorties, and we used multiple USSP operators, some of them overlapping one another, some of them adjacent, some of them working alone. We did collaboration with municipalities and government entities like police, and a lot of commercial applications. And what happened that during this initiative, we had the COVID, and we worked with 18 hospitals, delivering medical supplies or medical samples between hospitals to show that there is a way to do it. In this short video, we'll see one of the demos, that 2-week demos in a city called Beersheba in Jerusalem. In order to, for the next questions, our airspace is totally controlled. We don't have VFR, so we have controlled airspace. It makes our life easier to control this kind of operation. And all of the activities were done in segregated airspace in this controlled environment. These are HMOs that deliver supplies or blood samples. Security missions. Delivering goods between supermarkets or This is a demo for a BVLOS flight in Jerusalem, 70 kilometers between two hospitals.
And it's in segregated airspace.
Segregated airspace. But during the operation, we have an ATC guide that is supposed to coordinate if a helicopter is coming to land.
Okay.
We are moving forward for the next 2 years, and we are trying to expand the operational range for BVLOS long range, 150 kilometers, until up to 150 kilometers to increase the maximum takeoff weight for delivery. And we are trying to insert also the eVTOL and the urban air mobility into this airspace. We are trying to initiate a government-funded U-Space in one of the municipalities in order to create the business. Because to create a U-Space, you need a business underneath to work. And we understood that without funding the first operation, it will not begin. Cooperation with emergency organization, which is also a little governmental organization. We create a test range with the MOD. Before we heard about the trying to connect between military and civil, so it's a test range together with the MOD. We develop requirements for landing sites or vertiports. Landing site is different from vertiport. It's where all the delivery drones, all the small drones has to land. This is an issue that is not only aerial, it's also infrastructure and collaboration with other commercial and public entities. We have some lessons learned. We'll talk about it later, but all these systems are GNSS reliant, and in an environment where there is no GNSS, and our environment has a lot of issues with it, either by infrastructure, if you fly inside cities, so you have the coverage is not well, it can create hazardous situations. The Common Altitude Reference System, drones are measuring their height from the ground, and airplanes use barometers. So the boundary layer between the system has to be decided. What is the mitigation? Man-manned deconfliction. We understand that it has to be together. You cannot, the future, in order to allow aircraft to land inside U-Space, take off, cross, you need to have one system that talks together, either by IT or on the web or something, but this is the next steps. The airworthiness requirement, the SORA is dealing with operators, and the manufacturers are not always connected. So the connection between the manufacturer and the SORA, for instance, standard scenarios, you can build systems certified for standard scenarios. And vertiport, as I said, it's not only aerial infrastructure, it's also the ground. And we heard in the previous lectures about how the city will deal with it, how they will plan the city, they plan the highways in order to incorporate all the future aviation. Thank you.
Just segregated airspace. I don't know if you can afford that in Israel. I mean, you have a tiny airspace which is already quite busy. So can you afford to have another layer of segregation for drone operations?
When you are around the city, it's already segregated because airplanes are not supposed to fly in the city. They fly above the city, so we have the natural segregation. So around the city and in the city, it's easy. Between cities, this is something that we have to create how to do it. The 150 kilometers BVLOS flights, it's something that we have to find a way to do it.
Mm. And this leads nicely to your points, Eugenio. So we are talking about segregation, but the implementation of U-Space airspace is considered to be a sort of smart segregation. What would be, in your opinion, the next steps or measures to be taken to enable manned and unmanned traffic integration? And what would you propose EASA to work next on this area?
Thank you, Patrick, and good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, the segregation or the smart segregation is still a reality in Europe, and I have to say that all the 50,000 associates of EFATCA are looking to Europe as a first in class. So they are really looking forward to having the results of what we are doing here, because it is not so common, and especially because we have in Europe a procedure for that, and controllers likes procedure. And we have the dynamic reconfiguration that can be seen in both ways, in my view. The first one is to express the implementation status, but on the other side, it can be also used to benchmark how good is your airspace. Because we have seen many times in the regulation and see that if you have to apply the dynamic reconfiguration too often, it means that you haven't had the correct planning for the airspace. So, but above that, that's probably another question that maybe would be a bit provocative for everyone, is what do we mean for integration? Because we are trying to integrate manned and unmanned aviation. So there are several ways. Are we thinking about an integration like the emulsion style? So are we trying to mix water and oil? So we need to have a third element, the emulsifier, that is, let's say, keeping the mixture stable. So if you use this example in a higher level perspective, you have a stable mixture. But if you go deep, if you zoom in, you still are able to, let's say, to discriminate all the elements involved. And what does it mean that in terms of, let's say, research and everything? Is basically that you have to find the correct emulsifier to do that. And now that's the step forward. We have starting, let's say, investigate UAS activities in 2015, as we saw this morning. And the advanced air mobility is just brand new, and the European Commission has now created a big box about the innovative air mobility, how we can integrate all that. So if we add new elements, we have to ensure that all the elements are, let's say, not vanishing the effects of the other one. We need to create a new emulsifier. We need to create new solutions. And so there is a lot of efforts to put in there. There is probably another kind of integration, and I've called that compound style, but where we integrate something that is, let's say, that can be integrated without any kind of, let's say, additional elements. It doesn't mean that what we are considering the compound should be naturally integrable, but we can work on that to leave them in that position. So we move the research and the investments from the end to the beginning. And probably this has a beneficial effect on the entire system, because it probably improves the predictability of the results. And you can add countless number of elements that can be compatible by nature. So it probably is more, let's say, a general approach, but can have definitely a good and benefits result on the way forward when we want to integrate high altitude operation, we want to integrate control traffic and whatever. I'm happy that in your question you mentioned the traffic, because this morning Mr. Olay says we want to integrate the airspace systems. So what do you want to integrate? Do you want to integrate the traffic, or do you want to integrate the system? That's probably another question we can try to answer. And probably traffic goes into one system, and the airspace management goes to the other one. So as a suggestion for, let's say, a work forward, probably we need first to integrate the traffic. Maybe we can, let's say, stay a bit closer to the current monet, so air traffic service is provided to traffic into controlled airspace, maybe with a slightly variation or new rules to try to integrate and to operate also with the unmanned aviation. And then we can, maybe, I know this is provocative, especially for pilots, we can extend use space to all airspace outside. So we will be in the situation where we have two providers and where the exchange and the coordination will be much easier. I know that probably there are, as we discussed yesterday in the European network stakeholders of European stakeholder, there are probably some, let's say, issues regarding the certification, the CISP and the USSPs, but in my view, sooner or later, if the aim, the target is to integrate the system, that has to be done. So again, try to shift the investment, the research at the beginning instead of the end. And once we have the integration, we can try to integrate the system. But this will require, for sure, the correct level of automation of the system. We cannot have a system like the EU space that is heavily automated with a very limited human intervention, and we can have on the other side the ATM side. So we need a correct balance, and we need for sure to keep a big eye open on the position of the human in that loop. And for sure, we probably need flight rules. We have heard about flight rules changing, I mean, in several panels and in several, let's say, international body. And with flight rules, for sure, it goes, along that is going the airspace classification and the structure of the airspace. And this is what I'd like to say. Do not think that controllers are too conservative. They are not. They like to be involved in that. So as a recommendation for everyone, engage controllers in that, because they are not the dinosaurs in the room, trust me. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We were much quicker than expected. So no, that's fascinating, I believe, and it leads also nicely to the next speaker on rules of the air, because as you can see in the drone strategy 2.0, it's said that the agency should propose modification to standardized European rules of the air to enable further US integration in the airspace. Yes. Koen, how would you propose for EASA to work on this task? And are you aware of mature concepts or technical or operational developments that EASA could consider and take into account for this task? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me here. And thanks for this question. It's so interesting because it allows me to take a little bit distance and to put the request for flight rules in a wider perspective. I already heard so many interesting notions in the presentations on new entrants, fair competition, BVLOS, smart integration. Now, if you look at it, drones, they take all shapes, all sizes, they can fly at all speeds, and they can fly everywhere. And that's why I think it's important that we really are aware that we are entering a new paradigm. A new paradigm, and we all feel it coming. What does that mean? It's nice to talk about a new paradigm, but what does it mean for us? And what is the essence of this? What are the main features of this paradigm? Now, we know that we are facing digitalization. Okay, fine. What does it mean exactly? We all also know that we have to move towards automation, more automation, and scalability. These three tenets, digitization, automation, scalability, are our main features of this new paradigm. And this allows us to do traditional functions in a different way. And we must seize these opportunities that the new paradigm offers us. And to take the first one, we are dealing with safety. Aviation is safety. The new paradigm, the new digital paradigm, allows us to manage safety in a completely different way. When you started as director of César, Patrick, long time ago when we still had hair and we were young, then you explained to me, okay, what we want to do is develop a business trajectory from point to point. That's exactly what the new digital automated way allows us to do. We make a big cigar from airport to airport or from entry point to exit point. We slice this cigar into sectors and we make 4D trajectories. And then this allows to already, in advance, deconflict air traffic. And this also allows, this is the way that we then manage safety in this new paradigm. So you see that the a priori deconfliction, that's a major shift that we are not able to do in the traditional aviation, where in fact the safety is centered on the exchange between two humans, ATCO, air traffic controller, and a pilot. If you can deconflict in advance, you see that that authorization service is key to manage safety. And also that conformance monitoring is so key in keeping the safety in the system. And that detect and avoid may not play such an important role as it plays in the traditional aviation. Now, the other feature of this new paradigm is that if we have in advance liaison or contacts between different actors in the system, use-based service providers, we can create an institutional framework which allows competition. And that's why we must get the use-based regulation right from the beginning. I heard already the market, okay, but the market, we understand that there should be competition in the market. We should have a sufficient level of competition for those use-based services in the market. And that's why from the beginning we must make sure that we don't have fragmentation in the European market. Yesterday, Jan-Christoph Utten mentioned the word fragmentation is poison. So Patrick, our task is to make sure that we don't have such a poisoned market. We must have a single European market from the beginning so that use-based really translates into a digital single European sky. Now, coming back to your question on do we need then flight rules in this new paradigm? Of course, of course, of course. Because flight rules keep the operation safe. Why do we have visual flight rules? Because if you're flying in a cockpit and you only have to rely on your eyes, then you must, then the situation, where can I see well, what the distance to preserve with clouds and so on, that is the essence to keep this operation safe. When we had new technologies supporting the pilot, and then developing the safety link between the air traffic controller and the pilot, that led to instrument flight rules. Now, in this digital, automated and scalable world of the new paradigm, I think we should heading towards digital flight rules. And what then is the essence of the digital flight rules? It should be connectivity. We must work with cooperative traffic to make the traffic predictable. We know in advance, before you start your business trajectory, you know in advance that you will be deconflicted. And that must remain intact. Your safety depends on that, and the safety of the whole system depends on that. So those digital flight rules will manage these new safety features. And they must not focus then on safe distances that ATCOs need to look on their screens, because those systems will become more and more autonomous and they will be able to keep safe distances from themselves. So you see that the operational focus to keep the system, not only the individual operation, but the whole system safe, it changes completely. And that is the big opportunity that those new technologies offer us. And the starting point, just to end my 7 minutes intervention, is really we are faced with new technologies. And from a societal point of view, we see so many opportunities arising. And the first question should be, where, as a new community, the drone community, where could we add most value? I hear people saying, yeah, we can offer this and this and this. Yeah, but what is the first questions that we should start with? And it's not, we should not be, of course we are proud of our new technologies, but that should not be the starting point. The starting point should be, how can we use these technologies to bring value, and what value exactly? And that's why, of course, we can start with medical transport and to save more lives. This should be an easy thing. And I think we should start with these basic questions, but it's a challenge. We shouldn't also underestimate, we are starting this new paradigm. We are moving from a human-human interface to a machine-machine and fully automated system, we should not, an operation-centric approach, we should not underestimate all the results that we already have been delivering, and we should remain agile. We are going into the right direction. Of course, we will have made mistakes, but we should closely follow the implementation that we really achieve our objectives. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. De Vos. I find remarkably that everybody agrees with each other, which more or less, if we go into details, I'm sure that we will find some areas of disagreement. So let's try to find some areas of disagreement. I remind you that you can use the Slido tool to enter any questions, but let me start with something. Eugenio, I was fascinated by your presentation where you talked about traffic integration and then system integration. The system integration is very interesting, and that was what Koen was referring to, automated concepts and things like this. And I will ask you the question, how do you see the evolution of the role of the ADCOs in this automation process? And I will ask the same question to Johan from a more business perspective. How do you see things? Eugenio first.
Yeah. And this is probably the big topic we are working on at EFATCA, but in general, because business models use automation to improve the traffic, so to allow more traffic that. And so I see several, let's say, possible issues in that. So one is the de-skilling, because the more integration we have, the more we, as ADCO, we rely on that because we know that they are there to help our work. But the problem is, what if the automation phase? Am I still able to work as I did maybe 4 years ago? Means SAP and whatever. So this is an aspect that has to be considered during the training process. You probably do not have to train only with the, let's say, top of the technology, but also to train on the contingencies measures or on a different perspective. And then to answer your question in a global view, I know we are drifting towards, let's say, a much more automated system and the machine-to-machine interface. But if we want to keep this approach, so if we want to use the man as the managed by exception, I probably think that we will have a big problem on reliability, on accountability and liabilities. Because how the man can be able to solve an issue that the machine is not able to? Do I have to decide what eyes would leave? That's the point that probably is not only connected with the aviation world, but it fits very well there. It's probably connected to the entire new technologies that have been developed and the artificial intelligence, machine learning. So as soon as you put a new automated system there, you have to, again, evaluate the position of the man. So to be short, I think that the air traffic control, as we know, will probably last for, let's say, quite a few years, for quite a long time. Maybe later on will be shifted towards more engineer position, like a supervisor, but it's far to be done, I think.
Okay. Johan.
Okay, thank you. The reason why we invested in a subsidiary to become USSP is because of the strategic importance. We are convinced when you want some use space and drones and deconflicting that it has to be in an automated manner. We are not going to use ADCOs to do the deconfliction between drones. And so at a certain moment, this automation, these programs will be, we think, that good, and we will go to a hybrid airspace so that we can also, at the longer term, apply this to ATM. That's what we're really convinced, and that's why, as a company, we invested in this. Will there be any ADCOs anymore? No, but they will have a different role. I think it will be more monitoring and so on. But I'm convinced that the solutions that we found now for drones, that at the longer term, they will also be applicable to ATM, and it will be at a longer term one system and with still ADCOs, but with a different role. That's what I think.
I don't think it's black and white. It's not completely automated or not automated at all. When you look at automation levels in the cockpits, we have, still the human being at the heart of the safety of the operations, but a lot of things are basically delegated, quote unquote, and to the machine, and that's probably what's likely to happen also in the ATM world. How fast do you see the development of the market, Koen? What do you think?
That's the million-dollar question. And there again, I mentioned what is the value that we can materialize with these new technologies. And there, I think it is the new actors who should really take advantage of these new technologies. It is how can you, if you can demonstrate the value. For instance, again, let's focus on medical transport. It depends on the actors in the field. We have the use-based regulation. And in fact, the three regulations together, we have the new rules for the new paradigm. We have an operation-centric approach where you can communicate between machines and machine. We have that in place. Now the question is, how fast can the market seize these opportunities of those new technologies? That depends a little bit. It's in the hands of ours. It's the hands of you, because if we want to have a non-fragmented market, we must make sure that there is a real harmonization, that if you attract investors, they do not invest in the Belgian market, in the Swiss market, in the Israeli market, but at least already in the European market. This is very important, that you have a harmonized access to the market, that we have real competition in the use-based service market. So make sure that the certification process is proportionate to the risk, and that we have a sufficient number of use-based service providers who are able to pass the test of certification without diminishing the safety levels, but at least proportionate to the risk. And then the market will take off. And we started this discussion with BVLOS. Yes, we need to have safe BVLOS operations, because that will lower the cost, and that will make so many more services more valuable for the economy. And what is at stake? We are not solving an aviation issue, we are solving a whole economy issue, because we think that there can be much value created in the whole economy. So that's why we have to get our act together, and we must get it wrong from the beginning. And we are very eager also to work with you from a good perspective to get it right from the beginning, to avoid fragmentation, to ease the way towards the entry of the use-based service market, also and make sure that then the European model becomes a good practice for the globe.
Eugenio, you suggested earlier that use-based could also manage manned traffic, but wouldn't that make use-based service providers becoming air traffic service providers? And how do we deal with that?
Well, indeed, I've suggested that is one of, let's say, probably the approach we are proposing, having in mind a future global integration also of the system. Well, in non-controlled airspace, we have to provide basically alerting service and flight information service. That is quite different from the traffic information service we have into the controlled airspace. And the precision and the information provided by the two services are completely different. And that's why one is, of course, into the controlled airspace, the other one is outside. And well, for sure, the use space is already into the regulation. We already have the traffic information service that is much more higher level, in my view, than the flight information service. Is much more precise. So having that in mind, probably the USSP would be also beneficial. Subscribing for a USP service would be also beneficial for manned aviation. I'm sure that might be some problem in the certification. So this might let's say, badly impact with the development and in the market. But I think it's up to EASA, maybe give some discounts on that.
Just to stay on this manned traffic, Benny, how do you think we should deal with emergency services, police helicopters, so the type of traffic that we have in urban airspace? how should we deal with them to enable proper traffic integration?
I will be a little, we look into the future. I think that the airspace, the requirements for the manned aviation should change. In order to fly into UTM, you'll have to have equipment that will separate you from the U-space. Until now, we tried to create a system with no influence on manned aviation. But when you look at the future, in order to do this integration for the emergency services in the U-space, you need the separation also for the manned aviation, and it cannot be only on one side, because it's impractical. It should be on both sides. The equipment on the aircraft, maybe create a new airspace. Instead of VFR, call it U-space VFR, that will have equipment on the aircraft that will tell you what is around you and deconflict from the unmanned system.
It's the famous conspicuity
Conspicuity.
concept.
Everybody becomes a customer of U-space.
Can become visible, yes. Let's talk about money. Johan, how far is public funding key to kick off the drone and U-space market? What do you think? Do you need public money, or can you do it yourselves?
But there are two different roles. First, as SKYS, we are a common information service provider. That's some public task. I think for the investment, public money can be used. Afterwards, we should see for tarification and so on how it works. USSP is something different because there you will have a market and so on. What I see is that if also for USSPs you want them financially to be viable and so on, you need some end-to-end solution and not only a USSP as some provider that does the necessary to have the safety traffic of drones. I think for that, if they only do that, the financial or the business model isn't there. And there, a USSP, and I see it also in different sectors, has to be some more end-to-end solution to have some business model that is workable. Otherwise, maybe for some public USSPs that have to give service to public police and so on, there you can have some financing. But for the commercial, you should not have public financing, but it should be a more elaborated business model then.
Koen, what's the business model for USSPs? Should USSPs be connected automatically to an ANSP? Should they be connected like what we saw for Wings to a delivery service? What's the business model? That's the right question.
That's a very interesting question, and it's always difficult to make an intelligent translation from what we know from aviation to the new digital aviation. And of course, the new paradigm will also impact the business model. And the question is, to which extent will the U-space service, the UTM service, remain a standalone business? Yes or no? And maybe it might be the case if you're able to provide additional services, maybe fleet management and so on, or to what extent allows this new wave of digitization, automation, allows us to vertically integrate, and you see some companies becoming not only drone manufacturers, drone operator, drone maintenance company, but also UTM service provider, and they don't want to earn specifically money from the UTM. The UTM or the U-space then is an enabler to earn money from the value that they see in the drone service. And that's why it is, in our analysis, so important to make an analysis, a distinction between different markets and the different activities that we see emerging between the U-space service market, the enabler for the drone operations, which is also a separate market, and then the drone service, at the end of the day, the final customer. If I'm in infrastructure, or I'm a hospital, for instance, and I want to organize my emergency services, I want to fly a drone there to connect a doctor with victim of the accident. So if I just fly a drone there, no value added yet. What is the value added when you really can connect that tractor with the victim? So the drone must be there and they must be connected. And the value is then the help that the tractor is giving to the victim. The UTM, you pay it because it's the enabler. So this is the way that many companies are still thinking. And when I heard this morning Mark Allen of Boeing in his key address saying, we need to have a holistic approach, that is a question. What are the functions that we will have to perform in this new paradigm? Do we have to stick to manufacturing, or shall we also operate our fleet of drones, or lease them and operate them, maintain them? These are the big questions, because you must find a value proposition to build your sustainable business upon. And this is the question, and I think it will evolve over time. We will see that over time, and maybe in 5 years' time it will be clear, but nobody has a clear answer to that. And we all try. If you see also traditional aviation players, they are still looking at what's happening, and they are placing their bets in different baskets, which is a very wise decision maybe. It's not only getting it right, but getting it right in the right moment. Timing is also very important.
We have a question, a couple. Oh, I couldn't see. I'm sorry. There are lots of questions. How are you expecting use-based cost models to affect the development of the UAS industry? Who wants to take this one? Paul.
Yeah, use-based cost models. I think we have to start again from what are the operations that we will see emerging. And you see such a wide variety of drone operations. If we had to compare drones with a mobile terrestrial industry, we should not only see cars evolving into autonomous cars, but also autonomous lorries or autonomous coaches, autonomous bikes. And that is the whole range of terrestrial vehicles that we have to have in our minds when we talk about drones and drone market developments. So with these different types of vehicles, you can conduct so many different types of businesses, and you will see what then is the cost aspect. The drone will no longer be a huge cost. The cost will be reduced. We try to base our connectivity on telco or whatever. It is no longer depending on a bespoke infrastructure, no longer need for primary radar, secondary radar. We no longer need it. We try to do everything, to conceive everything to reduce cost. And that will enable, if we can reduce cost, this will enable much more business and unlock the value.
Autonomous bikes, that's an interesting concept. We need to think about it. It was mentioned that fragmented use-based operating models in Europe should be avoided. How can we achieve the desired and maybe needed level of standardization? That's a question for you, Johan.
I think there, on the European level, EASA should play a role, because it's not in the different countries that we can do the harmonization. And therefore we need to cooperate with you to come to the harmonization, because otherwise, as you said, every country has to have its own USSP, and therefore global players, for example, for the new entrants, it won't be impossible to have for each country a different sort of rules and so on. So there, on European level, EASA should play a role together with the European countries.
We as industry and regulators together, we are also happy to play a role. I think we have to assume together our responsibilities. For instance, if we have to reach out, what will be the APIs and the connectivity between USSPs and CIS? We can come up with a protocol that functions. How will the different USSPs communicate with each other? We have to come up with an adequate, robust inter-USS model and so on. Yeah. So there we have to play a role together, and EASA could then endorse the solutions.
And there we have projects like Birdie, together with a lot of stakeholders in Europe, to do this use-based implementation, and where we can bottom-up give elements for this harmonization, or where there is a lack of standardization. Yeah.
It seems to me that UTM, use space, is a very European notion. No? I'm not sure that in other parts of the world we have something similar, but it may be due to our history of fragmented airspace and things like this. Yeah. I think that Benny in Israel, didn't you copy what we worked on?
We copied from both sides of the ocean. For small drones, we copied from the
107.
from the United States, but from the UTM, we copied the EASA.
What would be your number one thing that where we should learn from the lessons in Israel?
I will not say the number one thing, but I think that to learn from the military that has a lot of experience, even in small drones now, doing all the air traffic management, this is something that civil and military can benefit.
That's a very wise recommendation. Do you see, Eugenio, some resistance, reluctance in FATCA or in the controllers community towards drones in general, EASA? What's the feeling?
No, I don't see that. I mean, probably the fact that still mainly under research is not affecting the, let's say, daily work. Lots of people are not really, let's say, conscious of what's going on. That's why we are putting a lot of efforts in a sort of dissemination exercise among our associates and try to be involved in as many projects as we can to catch the right thing. And several times we listen to the word legacy aviation. And well, for people that knows English better than me, sometimes legacy is not a very, let's say, positive meaning. As I said before, I don't think that we are scared of losing our job. We are not scared of to be overwhelmed by a new system. We are absolutely not. We will very happy to participate because we learn, and first of all, we love our job. And probably the mentality, especially the mentality of an operative air traffic controller that is daily on frequency, can probably help industries to solve a lot of issues just in a glance, because we maybe have, let's say, a different approach, a side approach to the matter, that we can just be beneficial. And yeah, I think that as a FATCA, we are working on that. We are working to develop the correct culture on approaching the matter. But on the other side, we for sure need to evaluate correctly and have very clearly in mind which is the position of the human in that. I would say that again. We need for sure to find the correct position of the operator. I wouldn't say controller, the operator inside the system, because it's the key point to enable everything.
Have you discussed with your colleagues from the military sector who are more used to drone operations and integration with normal quote-unquote traffic? So have you started discussions with your colleagues from the military sector?
Yeah, we have. Military has, let's say, they are more using the word flexible with military sounds strange, but they are more flexible. I mean,
those are your words. Not
okay,
mine.
sorry. Apologies. No, I mean they are in Europe. We have the two different type of traffic: operative traffic and general traffic. So once they mostly operate operative with drones. So they have. And they operate most of the time into restricted areas. So they have a different approach to the matter. They probably do not think about the integration. Even if they fly as general aviation, for example, over the high seas, they still have the due regard. So they can basically ignore every procedure, but just ensure the safety of the operation. So we have engaged them. We are learning about how they manage that, but most of the time is more related to the Airspace section than to the UAS. We are, let's say, the discussion we have with the military guys for the UAS is more related to the counter UAS. So how to manage drone problems or unauthorized penetration of the airspace near airports.
Okay. We can spend hours discussing about this. This is an area for a lot of work in the future. We are coming towards the end of our panel, so I will now ask each of you to in 30 seconds each. I know it's a
That's a
real
challenge.
challenge for you.
Yeah.
So think about it. In 30 seconds, what do you wish to happen in the next years, okay? But not in the next 10 years, in the next 2 or
Months.
3 years or months. We start with you, Kun.
Oh, we would like to see in the coming months, years, a sufficient number of use-based service providers certified, pass the certification process, which is then under financial control, financially kept and so on, so that we have a real competition and that we can unlock the value that those new technologies offer. And that we see a network of hospitals linked by a drone network. These are the things that we should be seeing by the end of next year.
Yes. Okay, good. Eugenia.
I think we would like to be more involved in the project because most of them are from the economic perspective. They are not really taking care about the operational implementation. Cesar is dealing with that, of course, but we probably need to work more with industries, and we probably have to better discuss the allocation of responsibility, especially for the dynamic reconfiguration airspace and the old procedure connected to the ATC.
Very good. Benny.
The next year, I would like to see an operational use space in Tel Aviv.
That's a very ambitious goal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Johan.
This year, I wanted a competent authority to certify in Belgium a CISP and a USSP, because, and also in the rest of Europe, that CAA's regulators are on time are ready to certify, so that the big evolution of drones can really make happen and take happen.
Thank you very much. You are not allowed. I think that's the conclusion of our panel. U-Space is coming. It's arriving. Tel Aviv next year. In Belgium next year. Everywhere next year. We take into account that because it's becoming a reality, also controllers need to be involved. And that would be the conclusion of this panel. Please let us thank the panel members with a round of applause. Thank you.